Hi guys, Jay Knowlton here once again, and I'm going to move a little bit away from the visa stuff today. And today what I'm going to talk about is a bit of a warning or a potential prediction about what a lot of people's jobs might look like in maybe half a decade or something like that. Now, that doesn't seem too close. Like it's not that it's like 10 years. Well, that's like a long time away. Let's try and remember that Corona was like 6 years ago already. So we're already getting close-ish to a decade. Now, I'm going to focus on English teaching jobs today. Of course, the kind of jobs foreigners do in Japan, they range from farming, care, factory work, but a lot of the people who are watching these videos are not going to be from those industries. Let's be realistic. So I should communicate with those who are probably going to see this. And a lot of people are either in the English teaching industry or have made their starts in the English teaching industry and then moved on to something else. Now, the reason that I wanted to make this video today is that I saw a kind of report about what's the actual title? The business market size for English teaching in Japan. And currently it sits at around 790 billion yen a year. But that is down about 5% from just a few years ago. Now, why have these changes come about? Well, we do have a lot of different reasons. One of them is going to be about AI and stuff like that, but also the way that people learn or the money that they're willing to spend or the places that they are willing to spend have changed too. Now, if you have lived in Japan for a while and you are of the observant mind, you will have noticed some of the things that I'm going to talk about. But first of all, I'm going to talk about the ALT industry. And I've got a video that's planned. I've actually got a lot of materials for it, but a lot of the materials are public government documents, and I need to figure out, am I allowed to show them? Because they are public. How do I talk about them? How do I not get in trouble? But basically, I found the local government reports of how much they pay to these companies like Interac or Borderlink or Heart. I found the exact payments that they made, and it gives a very good idea of why salaries are so small, because it goes into detail of how much they pay, how many teachers that pays for, the nationalities of the teachers, what schools they're going to, how many hours they have to teach a year. There's so much to it. And what they're paying for the amount of people is very small. You are never going to get the pay rise if you're an ALT, because the cut is so little that there's no room for growth, because it's a competitive market and it's not competitive for you. You are not the competitor. The dispatch companies are fighting a race to the bottom, because if they cannot make a contract with the governments, then they can't get any money. For example, if you've got company A, company B, and they all want to enter, let's say, Akita City in the north of Japan, of course, the government wants to pay little as possible. So instead of saying, like, I want 30 million yen for the year, and then company B is like, no, we want 33. No. It goes the other way. Company A is like, I want 30 million yen per year. And then company B is like, well, we'll give you 29.5, or we'll take 29.5. And then company C is like, no, we'll do 28. We can do 28, because they're obviously calculating their profit margin and they're willing to skim their margins. If anyone's lived in Japan and then you've tried to sell your car, for example, the car companies compete to give you a better price, which means they make less money, but they need to get that sale. And also, like, if you've moved house and you have like different moving companies, they will compete to give you a lower price, because paying a lower price or receiving lower is better than receiving nothing, if that makes sense. Sorry. I've got a little bit of air in my throat. I've been talking a lot. I just did a 45-minute interview with a very big YouTuber, and I'm about to do a lesson as well. So my voice is in full movement mode. So the ALT industry is also very, very stripped down. Now, the Eikaiwa industry is also on the decline. And I've got some stats here that says traditional physical Eikaiwas, their current average profit margin is only 3 to 7%, which is on the decline. Now, 3 to 7% as a profit margin is very, very low, because what the risk is there is if another coronavirus comes, or if a lot of students jump to a different form of study, that profit margin could end up zero or at a loss, and no one wants that. So, but the thing is here, so it talks about the primary cost drivers are commercial rent for a building, of course, and native teacher payroll, because native teachers, you need to have multiple of them probably, for depending on the size of the school. You'll need to have cover teachers for when they're sick. You'll need like a Japanese kind of like supporter, usually the manager, and then of course the rent, which is very, very expensive. And then it says here there's a sustainability risk is very high, because the traditional Eikaiwas are at risk to having their business stolen from apps and online platforms. Now, I know this very well because I am a teacher on italki, which is an online platform. And now here is something that's very, very interesting. Weirdly enough, despite the fact that I live in Japan and most of my experience is in Japan, on italki for the first few years, I rarely got any Japanese students. Like almost none. I've had one Japanese guy who I've had the whole time. I've done more than 3 lessons with him. But apart from that, like Japanese students were very, very inconsistent. Interestingly, over the past 6 months, I now have about 25 Japanese students. That's on top of all the Chinese students, the Korean students, German, French, European, Brazilian. Did I say China already? Did I say Russia already? And I've even got a lot of Ukrainian students too. I teach about 60 to 70 different students a month, and my schedule is at full capacity. I opened 3 hours this morning and tomorrow morning, and they all got filled immediately. But the interesting thing is also, I assumed that the reason I didn't get many Japanese students is because my lessons are very expensive. I got a Japanese booking from a Japanese person this morning for tonight. No, not tonight, tomorrow night, because one of my other students cancelled. It's a 1 hour conversation lesson, which costs 4,500 yen. Now, if you go to a traditional physical eikaiwa, you're paying about 8,000 yen to 9,000 yen for 4 1 hour lessons a month. However, that means my service is costing almost double that. Yet, more and more Japanese people are choosing this service. Now, here is where the business in Japan is being divided as well. And this is what I meant. If you've been in Japan for a while, you might have noticed. Premium English coaching, which has a profit margin of 15 to 22%. Now, what premium premium English coaching is not the normal Eikaiwa. I should have really got a list of names, but if you've lived in Japan and you've seen the commercials for Rise Up, when they show like a kind of fat person and then it's like and then and then they're suddenly thin because they've had this like, this very high intensity weight loss program. Rise Up also created an English teaching program as well, which charge huge amounts of money. Here's the other thing. The teachers are not natives. They're Japanese bilinguals. And this is where the industry, which I think is going to change, because these premium English coaching services, they're on the rise. When you go on the train, you can probably see lots of different ones. You're paying 5,000, 6,000 per lesson. And it's kind of more of a trustworthy exchange for the Japanese person because they're with huge companies. Like these big companies in Japan are creating their own English coaching services. So you've got the accountability of the company to provide a good service. You've got the Japanese bilingual coach who, to be honest, is probably more responsible and probably going to teach better than the traditional Eikaiwa teacher. No respect. I've met hundreds of Eikaiwa teachers. I wouldn't want to put my daughter in an Eikaiwa, regardless of what language she speaks. I wouldn't want them to teach my kid because I know how bad a lot of them are. I've seen some absolute horrific teachers in this country. And that premium English coaching is on the rise. And that, I think, is where a lot of Japanese places are going to go because they would rather pay a higher price for what they consider a more trustworthy and potentially better product. And then the last, of course, are the AI edtech content that they can find. You see apps all the time advertised on social media where they can pay a monthly subscription to talk to a chatbot. A lot of Japanese people I know create journals using ChatGPT. They talk to AI to practice their English. And a lot of them will then supplement that with taking lessons with me. Now, the market is so divided by different ways you can learn English. And what that means is once these kind of eikaiwas start to close, you're going to see a lot of people, regardless of the changes to PR, I think a lot of people are going to start losing their jobs. I think when you've got a place like GABA, for example, which provides one-to-one lessons, they all already don't provide full-time contracts to their staff, only part-time, because it's not sustainable for them. And they can't get enough students to fill everyone's contracts anyway. So they're going to start closing. Places like, what I used to work at Peppy Kids Club, which was a children's focused Eikaiwa classroom. And of course, Peppy Kids Club also was always in the countryside or more rural areas. Once the number of kids start to go down, less customers for those. We already see places like Peppy Kids Club relying more on teachers from the Philippines, from Jamaica, I've seen some come from like many African countries as well. They were already trying to reach into markets where people are just wanting to come to Japan and maybe not too focused on the salary. I think a lot of these places are really going to start to disappear. And it really reinforced my point to myself that going online was much more sustainable for me because I can charge a higher price, but it's my reputation that's on the line. I've been helping international schools, as I've mentioned this month. One of the international schools I help charges 230,000 yen a month. And it's not one of like the big famous ones. These are just normal kind of international preschools, like childcare facilities, but they already got like 40 to 50 students because people are willing to pay more for what they think is a better product because this company built a big service and a big company first before moving into this market. So I just wanted to share those things that I found. Maybe somebody finds them interesting. Please let me know what you think, and I'll see you all next time.